On the day the sky cried, silence fell before chaos. In a forgotten playground on the city's edge, young Eli Morgan sat alone in a cracked sandbox, his small fingers tracing spirals into the dust as if trying to make sense of a world already crumbling around him. Overhead, the sky split open, alien ships like bruised shadows descended, casting the world into panic as electromagnetic pulses ripped through the air, killing power, communication, and hope. Cities flickered into darkness. Satellites fell, like stars, somewhere nearby, in a rusting pickup truck. Jordan Morgan sipped warm beer and ignored the string of unread messages from his son, years of distance too heavy to bridge. But Eli didn't run. While sirens screamed and parents grabbed their children, Eli stood still, eyes wide, face calm. One of the ships broke formation, paused above him, scanning. Then it stopped, hovered, and left. At the university down the hill, Dr. Kemi, a quiet astrophysicist, froze mid-sentence as she watched the same anomaly unfold on her rooftop. The ships ignored the boy. Military jets scrambled, cities fell into hysteria, but the invaders, for reasons no one could explain, never touched Eli. In the silence that followed, one thing was clear. The boy no one understood had become the only thing they feared. Before the skies cracked open, and the world crumbled beneath screaming skies and dead satellites, there was a boy who drew spirals in silence and a man too broken to notice. Jordan Morgan had once been brilliant, an analyst with a mind like a scalpel. He could slice through global data patterns, threats, and geopolitical risks with terrifying accuracy. Governments listened, Black Ops teams followed his models. He wasn't just good. He was the quiet storm behind closed war rooms. But brilliance has no place in grief. When his wife Anaya died during childbirth, the one person who tethered his genius to Grace Jordan collapsed inward. Not in flames, but in slow, suffocating silence. He couldn't bring himself to hold the child, couldn't look into eyes that reminded him of her. When doctors said the boy was different, Jordan didn't hear autism spectrum or neuro. He heard faulty. He heard the reason she's dead. So Jordan walked away, not physically, not at first. He went to work, paid the bills, but every interaction was a ghost of what could have been. He grew cold, clinical. When Eli wouldn't speak, or play the way other kids did, Jordan saw only barriers. He didn't see the hours Eli spent lining up toys and Fibonacci sequences, didn't see how the boy always looked up just before a power outage, as if sensing a rhythm in the air. To Jordan, it was all noise. So he buried himself in whiskey and war reports, letting Eli's quiet world drift far from his own. And Eli's world was quiet by design. At 10 years old, his life was a routine of soft colors, padded headphones, and the comfort of repetition. He didn't speak, not with words, but he communicated, through textures, symbols, and spirals that mapped emotions far deeper than language. When overwhelmed, he tapped twice on the ground. When calm, he traced his fingers through the air in a looped rhythm. People misunderstood him. Teachers labeled him slow. Neighbors called him strange. Only a few noticed the precision in his patterns. One of them was Dr. Kemi, years ago. She'd been a visiting neuroscientist at the university where Eli participated in a pediatric brain mapping study. She remembered him not just because of his unusual scans, but because of the way he watched. She saw in his silence what most missed: recognition, awareness, intelligence filtered through a different kind of mind. Her own research focused on artificial intelligence and neural pattern predictions, studying how cognition arises, not from words, but from consistency, from pattern recognition. And Eli's brain, it didn't just process patterns, it lived them. In the years that followed, Kemi quietly kept tabs on Eli, accessing anonymized medical data, revisiting his scans, even attempting to replicate some of his mental pattern models in her machine learning simulations. But academia moved slowly, and the world outside moved faster, toward its breaking point. Environmental disasters, proxy wars, disinformation. Economic collapse. Earth's pulse quickened, erratic and unsustainable. That's when they came. The first pulse knocked out communication in Asia. Within hours, satellites dropped. Military radars went blind. The skies filled with dark, triangular ships that hummed like dying stars. At first, it seemed like war. But the invaders didn't strike cities with fire. They moved methodically, scanning, observing. Then, a chilling revelation rippled across scrambled frequencies. A message, decoded by scientists listening to modulated radio bursts. Cleansing protocol initiated. Planetary disorder above threshold. They were not conquerors. They were janitors of entropy. Their task was to wipe out chaotic civilizations before they spread their instability. Earth had been flagged. The species had failed. But something stopped them. One child. Reports surfaced globally. A single boy in the western U.S. was spared. A ship paused above him, scanned, and withdrew. No attack, no vaporization, no reaction. In the days that followed, more anomalies surfaced. The ships hovered, but avoided the area where the boy Eli Morgan resided. Some called it coincidence. Others called it divine intervention. Kemi knew better. She accessed old MRI patterns, matched timestamps, cross-referenced the electromagnetic fields. Eli's brainwave rhythms weren't just unique. They harmonized, however faintly, with the frequencies the alien ships emitted. It was as if the boy wasn't just spared. He was recognized. But the world didn't care about nuance. As news broke, panic consumed the military. Leaders feared Eli was a target or worse, a beacon. The government classified him. Agencies mobilized to bring him in for his protection. Some feared he was communicating with the invaders. Others saw him as the key to humanity's last bargaining chip. And Jordan. He was drinking in his rusted truck, parked outside a decaying motel, when the world's most wanted face flashed across the emergency broadcast. His son. The boy he hadn't spoken to in over a year. The boy who used to leave spirals on his doorstep in Chocantil. Even that stopped. Jordan felt the weight then, not just of guilt, but of irrelevance. The world had cracked, and somehow, his son had become central to it. He drove back to the house, dust-covered, unchanged. Eli's caretaker, an older woman from the neighborhood, met him at the door with judgment in her eyes. He waited. She said simply. Inside, Eli was at his drawing table, headphones on, spinning spirals again and again in charcoal. He didn't look up when Jordan entered, didn't flinch. Jordan stood in the doorway, unsure of what to say. Eli, he tried, his voice cracking. We need to go. No response. I'm your father. He hated how hollow it sounded. He hated how unfamiliar he felt in his own son's presence. Eli didn't speak. He pushed a drawing across the table. A ship, a spiral, a human figure beneath it. Jordan stared. You saw them. Still no answer. Just a calm return to spiral drawing. Jordan moved closer, unsure if he should touch the boy, unsure if he even had the right. They're coming, he muttered. For you. Maybe for all of us. Eli looked up briefly. Their eyes met. Something ancient, something knowing flickered in the boy's gaze. Then he placed a small object on the table, a stone, smooth, painted with a spiral. Jordan took it. His hand shook when soldiers finally arrived, boots heavy. Voices tense. Dr. Kemi intercepted them with classified research files and a quiet, steady warning. If you take him by force, you may trigger what you're trying to avoid. But the government rarely listens to subtlety. Now, Eli is caught in a storm of agendas. Jordan is forced to protect a boy he doesn't understand against a world he once thought he could predict. And Dr. Kemi, for all her logic and research, begins to believe something science can't explain. That Eli isn't just different. He is necessary. as cities flicker, as ships loom, and humanity teeters on collapse. The emotional truth beneath it all remains simple and raw. A broken man must find the courage to love the son he never knew, before the world takes him away. And Eli, he just keeps drawing spirals, because in them, he sees the shape of what's coming. Not war, not peace. Pattern. It happened in the middle of chaos, gunfire, screaming, the hiss of plasma slicing through air. A resistance convoy had taken shelter in a ravaged city block, hoping to disrupt the alien path with stolen EMPs and desperation. Eli stood near the edge, small and still, fingers trailing invisible spirals in the dust, as soldiers scrambled and screamed around him. Jordan, rifle shaking in his grip, watched in disbelief as the first drone descended, sleek, silent, deadly. It hovered over Eli, aimed its core toward him, and then paused. Lights flickered. The drone scanned the boy, just like before, but this time, it powered down entirely, folding into itself and collapsing harmlessly at his feet. Around them, other ships fired with deadly precision, vaporizing buildings, burning through tanks. But each time Eli was within mere feet, their weapons halted. One ship twisted its trajectory mid-attack, just to avoid a blast radius near him. Jordan couldn't explain it. No one could. But Dr. Kemi, watching from her portable lab miles away, was already calculating. Eli's brain wasn't just unique, it emitted a rare, coherent neural harmony. In a universe driven by entropy, Eli radiated order. The aliens weren't confused by him. They were responding to him, revering him. She begged command to stand down, to listen, but military minds saw only opportunity. They wanted to weaponize the anomaly, march Eli into battles like a living. Ceasefire? Kemi fought back. Jordan, torn between disbelief and paternal instinct, didn't know who to trust. Then, in the center of the battlefield, one of the ships lowered a ramp. An alien being stepped forward, not with menace, but reverence. Tall, luminous, unreadably, approached Eli, slowly, and then did something no one expected. It knelt. One long, elegant hand touched the boy's shoulder. A nearby translator cracked and came alive with broken, musical speech. He does not lie. He does not destroy. He aligns. Silence fell. The world, watching through drones, broadcasts, and trembling binoculars, saw what none could unsee. The most powerful force in the universe had chosen a silent child the world had once ignored. And now, the ships no longer hovered in conquest. They began to follow him. A boy who never spoke had become Earth's only voice of peace. They called it protective custody. But the truth was clear. Jordan, Eli, and Dr. Kemi were prisoners in a high-security underground facility buried beneath Utah rock. They were interrogated, monitored, and isolated under the guise of national safety. Outside, the world unraveled, storms where there should be sun, skies ripped by unseen frequencies, and whispers of global governance uniting for retaliation. But amid the chaos, something miraculous began. Eli, barely 10 and still silent, began to draw again. Not spirals this time, blueprints. Elegant, layered structures far beyond his age, etched in chalk on cell walls and napkins. The alien ships mirrored them. Wherever he drew, ships hovered and released pulses that, two stunned scientists, began to reverse atmospheric degradation, healing the Earth. But still, the fear remained. Was he savior or signal? On the streets, public unrest boiled. Half the world now worshipped the boy, building shrines with spiral motifs. The other half called for his destruction, convinced he was the reason the aliens hadn't left. Inside the compound, tension thickened. Kemi and Jordan, once divided by science and sorrow, found rare stillness in each other's company. One night, watching Eli sleep, Kemi said softly, "You didn't lose your son, Jordan. You just never saw him." The words stung because they were true. And while Jordan tried to reconcile years of absence, others moved faster. General Prescott had a plan to replicate Eli's neural frequency, to hijack alien control by cloning the boy's brainwaves into machines. Ethical lines blurred. A team went rogue. One night, under cover of a fake transfer, they kidnapped Eli. The boy did not cry. He simply stared. Jordan and Kemi, realizing too late what had happened, broke from containment, commandeering a vehicle and chasing the signal to a derelict research base hidden in the Nevada desert. There, Eli sat in a cold lab, surrounded by monitors, wires clamped to his temples. He began to hum a strange, rhythmic tone, subtle but growing. Lights flickered, screens crashed, entire systems failed. The base fell into darkness as alien ships descended like thunderclouds. One entity entered, fluid and glowing, bending close to the trembling technicians. It whispered, through a translator barely holding signal, "This world will end, unless he speaks." But Eli had never spoken, not in words, not aloud, not ever. Jordan burst into the chamber seconds later, eyes wild, voice hoarse. "Eli." The boy turned calm in the chaos, and hummed louder. The ground vibrated. Prescott's men fled. Kemi fell to her knees, whispering, "He's not just drawing patterns. He is the pattern." And Jordan, finally, understood. His son wasn't broken. He was the blueprint. The only question left, would the world protect him, or dismantle him for parts? Under fire, the desert burned. Alarms screamed from the facility as alien ships hovered overhead and military forces closed in, desperate to reclaim control. Jordan, bloodied and limping, shoved open the last blast door, knowing what it meant. Behind him, Kemi held Eli's trembling hand, urging the boy toward the waiting alien craft, its ramp unfolding like a whisper from the future. Jordan turned back once, face streaked with dirt and resolve, and locked eyes with Kemi. "Tell him I saw him," he said, breath catching. Finally. Then he ran into the chaos, drawing fire, giving them time. As Kemi and Eli entered the mothership, silence returned, an unnatural, heavy calm. In the heart of the ship, Eli was led to a chamber pulsing with light, the neural core, a sphere of floating sound and shifting memory. It surrounded him with voice data made alive. Then came the question, both spoken and felt, "Are your people like you?" Eli stood still, then slowly, deliberately. He picked up a silver stylus and drew a heart on the nearest surface. Simple, human, fragile. Then, for the first time in his life, he opened his mouth and spoke one word. "No." The ship trembled. The word echoed through the network like a sonic beacon. Across the globe, alien ships paused in midair, weapons powered down. The cleansing halted. In that single syllable, the aliens understood. Eli was not representative of humanity, but he was proof of its potential. He did not lie. He did not destroy. He aligned. And if he could exist, perhaps more could. The ships withdrew. One final broadcast rang across the skies. "Protect the one who aligned us, or we will return." Humanity had been by power, not by force, but by a child who had never been understood, now standing at the center of two worlds. And as the stars swallowed the ships once more, the earth remained wounded, uncertain, but with one undeniable truth. He spoke. After the storm, the skies cleared with an eerie, almost guilty quiet, as if the heavens themselves were mourning what nearly was. The alien ships had vanished beyond the stars, leaving behind no cities turned to ash, no monuments to their power, only the silence of what had been spared. Earth, scarred but alive, began to rebuild. Nations that once saw only division now clung to a strange unity, born not of treaties, but of awe. In the wake of it all, Dr. Kemi established the Eli Morgan Institute, a place where children were taught not just science, but harmony, the value of stillness, the language of patterns, the strength of emotional alignment. It was less a school and more a sanctuary for a new kind of thinking, one that didn't force minds to conform but celebrated their difference. Jordan's sacrifice became legend. His old threat analyzes once dismissed as paranoid and scattered were now used as foundational texts, studied in defense councils worldwide. He had died not just protecting his son, but believing in him, finally. And Eli, he lived quietly on the Institute's grounds, a soft shadow moving through gardens and classrooms. He no longer drew spirals. Now, he drew people, hands reaching, faces lifting, eyes meeting eyes. His room was filled with sketches of connection, not control. Outside the Institute, a massive mural graced the entrance, a child standing beneath a bowed alien leader, hand outstretched, heart glowing. It was both warning and prayer. Eli's story became legend, passed from child to child, whispered in bedtime stories and global broadcasts. But he was left in peace, shielded not by secrecy, but by reverence. He had saved the world not with weapons, not with words, but with the purity of what he had always been. And in doing so, the boy the world once ignored became the soul it could never afford to lose. Years later, under a softer sky, a group of school children wandered through the halls of the Global Museum of Alignment on airy, sunlit space built atop what was once a military base. Laughter echoed among exhibits, floating holograms of alien ships, fragments of Jordan Morgan's journals, and recordings of Dr. Kemi's lectures on neural harmony. In the heart of the hall stood a sculpture, tall bronze, still of a young boy with quiet eyes and an open palm. Eli Morgan, the child who never spoke until the world needed to hear him. A small girl, no older than he once was, stood in front of it, her hand brushing the etched spirals at the base. Behind her, the teacher spoke gently to the class. He never raised a hand, never gave an order, but they listened. The children moved on, drawn by interactive screens and souvenir stations, but the girl lingered. Then, as if pulled by something ancient and gentle, she walked outside, found a patch of soft earth beneath the mural wall, and picked up a stick. Slowly, she bent down and began to draw spirals in the dirt, quiet, focused, content. Above her, unnoticed by most, the clouds shifted. A flicker passed through the sky, not violent, not sharp, but rhythmic, as though something far above had paused and noticed. High in orbit, beyond the reach of satellites, a ship stirred, dormant, but alert, not invading, not retreating, waiting, watching. A single, final line whispered across the stars, spoken in the language of the ones who came before. The child showed us the path. We are still learning. And as the camera pulled back through clouds, across continents, into orbit, the spiral continued below, fragile, yet eternal, drawn not in force or fear, but in memory. Innocence, once seen, does not vanish. It echoes,